The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Glory to you, O Lord. "6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. They gave a dinner for him there, and Martha served, while Lazarus was one of those reclining at table with him. Mary took a liter of costly perfumed oil, made with genuine aromatic nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus and dried them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. It was Judas the Iscariot, one of the disciples, and the one who would betray Jesus, said, 'Why was this oil not sold for 300 days' wages and given to the poor?' He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief and held the money bag and used to steal the contributions. So Jesus said, 'Leave her alone. Let her keep this for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me.' The large crowd of the Jews found out that he was there and came, not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. The chief priests plotted to kill Lazarus too, because many of the Jews were turning away and believing in Jesus because of him." The Gospel of the Lord. Everybody, of course, I know, has their own way of pondering these readings that surround the Passion of the Lord, particularly during Holy Week. If you're one to ponder at all, there are certainly many ways to look at these particular kinds of readings. A little more than in the regular season, ordinary time, these readings typically are a little more paired together. But what might be the connection today? This is a prophecy of Isaiah, and even to this day, they're not specifically sure if Isaiah is referring to someone of their own time, maybe Isaiah himself, maybe there was another particular leader or servant or a generous person. Some say it's Israel itself as a country. For our purposes, it's widely known and broadly accepted that it's really referring to Jesus. And it says quite clearly 2 or 3 times in these relatively few verses that it's really about justice. "I, the Lord, have called you for the victory of justice." He's referring to Jesus. "I, God, call you, Christ, to the victory of justice. The death of the Lord is our justification." I was struck by the opening prayer, that in the passion of the Lord, what was the word? We may be revived. Are you revived by the passion of the Lord? Well, we should be. Not in his suffering, of course, but in the fruit of that suffering and the purity of his love. Until he, Jesus, the Christ, establishes justice on the earth. "A smoldering reed he will not break, a bruised reed and a smoldering wick he will not quench." Gentle, meek, nonviolent. Meek doesn't mean shrinking or faint of heart. To be meek is nonviolent. You would understand how easy it is to snuff out a smoldering wick or to bruise or break a bruised reed. But so gentle is the Lord that we are revived, are we not? In our failures, it said, and our sins, we could and should be revived. We should allow ourselves to be revived by the power and the light and the truth of the grace of the Lord's dying and rising. The week clearly has a tone of sadness, and well it should. But at the same time, remember, it's the celebration of the commemoration of the death of the Lord that gives us new life. Maybe the first reading, in a rather underlined sort of way, it strikes me this morning to kind of have the thought, it must have been a tense-filled week. The disciples don't really know what's going on, but if they were intuitive at all, they would have known that Jesus probably was not going to survive the week. I mean, unless they were just completely dense. Mark portrays them that way through the 16 chapters of Mark's gospel. But they had to intuit. Something important was happening. They've just completed, as the scriptures imply, the Palm Sunday, as we call it, the entrance into Jerusalem with all that cheering and hosannas. And now, in these few days before the Passion of the Lord, you think there'd been some more grumbling or complaining. It's like, well, Lord, I mean, we could cut the tension in the air with a knife here. What's going on? But somehow, Jesus, in the calmness of his own spirit, seems to have kept them from all this tension. No, it wasn't perfect. We just heard in the reading of Luke's Passion that they were still worried about who was going to be the most important. But in all of that energy, all that emotional energy, all that spiritual tension, we have this dinner. Now again, I think if you read if you read the Synoptic Gospels, this is John, you're going to get a different tone. I could have been incorrect. But sometimes, in the other Gospels, this is just a dinner with others. More pertinent here, and it's in all the Gospels, if I recall correctly, so it really was a real experience. They didn't make this. This isn't a parable. It's a story. But notice, it is consoling to me, not only that Jesus had his dearest friends. He allowed intimacy in his life. He allowed other people to love him. He allowed himself to be impacted by the love and affection of particular people like you and I. He wasn't, well, I'm the Lord, and, I keep my edges and corners, and I've got to, be pure for the Father, and, he lived life. I wonder what his favorite food was. Did he have a favorite cloak? Did he have favorite socks? Well, I wouldn't say that. Probably didn't wear socks. I like the fact that he had rich friends. You ever think of that way? That Jesus had rich friends. How do I know that? Very expensive perfume. Where'd they get that perfume? Where'd all that money come from? A liter of costly perfumed oil. And not a small little bottle like this. It was a lot. I wonder what they had for dinner. John paints a pretty visual picture. Lazarus was there, and they were honoring Jesus because he raised Lazarus from the dead. They're reclining at table. They didn't use chairs. They reclined. They kind of leaned on one side or the other, and it was a low table. And then Mary comes in. Now notice, it's not pointed out here. Of course, John doesn't do that. I think it's in Luke's gospel. Martha seems resolved. She's not complaining that Mary isn't helping. Mary's busy about her own business. She brings in the oil. How many pounds is unclear. She anoints the feet of Jesus and dries them with her hair. And as the reflection in the Word Among Us reflected today, for how many days did that fragrance stay on the feet of Jesus? Was it there 2 or 3 days later? At the end of the week, hanging on the cross? Did Pilate or Herod smell that perfume on his feet? Perhaps. You see, you can make it personal. Would you have liked to have been there? Would you have liked to have seen and experienced that? Gentle, meek, nonviolent. he was surrendered. And then even more, he defends her. Leave her alone. There's a book by that name written by, can't think of the author, a woman. He defends her. Now again, she's preparing, she'll save it and she'll keep it for the day of my burial. This was all in the wind. I mean, they had to hear it. How did they hear it? And then the crowd comes. Well, he's there. We got we don't want to miss. Something's going to happen. We got to be there. So these are really the last straws. The raising of Lazarus, at least as it's presented in John's Gospel, is really the last straw. Now that we have got to get rid of this guy. We're losing our religion. People are believing in him, and we got to do something. What might be there for you to ponder? Even in the stress and the tension of the surrendering of his life, Jesus was gentle and meek and nonviolent. We're all praying these days for the opposite of which is going on in the world, the instability of the world, our own government, our leaders these days. Better for us, too, to be gentle and meek and nonviolent and to pray. It might seem gullible to say, but God has a plan. And we all wish he'd hurry up, right? But God has a plan. Better for us to ponder the mystery of this suffering, this surrender, this passion. Ultimately, passion means passio or passive. Jesus is passively surrendering to his death, which is why I say he's not up there thinking, you people owe me big time. He surrendered for you and for me. Ponder that. What a great scene.